Okay, the focus of today's video is poetry. We're going to look at definitions of terms related to poetry. We're going to look at punctuation in poetry, and a lack of punctuation in poetry, and lines in poetry. The first thing you're going to do, you can see I'm trying out a new format here, is we're going to look at some definitions, and then these definitions need to be added to your notes. So if you need to pause the video, you might need to do that. All right. First definition is alliteration, and that's just the repetition of consonant sounds. For example, the W sound in this line. The wind whistled wildly while whisking the leaves upward. Notice that the W sound isn't always at the start of the word. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds. In the example, do you like blue, that oo sound is repeated. And notice that it's not always spelled the same way. It's the sound that's important, not the spelling. Figurative language. Let me zoom back here a bit. Language used by writers and speakers when the meaning is something other than the literal meaning of their words. So a metaphor or a simile or hyperbole, those would all be examples of figurative language. And if you're not sure what literal means, literal just means true to fact, not exaggerated, or what is really meant. Form. Form in poetry is the kind of poetry created, such as free verse or a limerick or a haiku or rhyming couplet. All of those would be an example of forms of poetry. Free verse. Free verse is poetry that doesn't have a regular pattern of meter or rhyme. And finally, imagery, which we've been talking about all year. Let me zoom back here. Actually, let me do this. There. Imagery is words or phrases that appeal to the senses being sight and sound and smell, touch and taste, and they have a lot of detail. Example, the salty sea air and the cloudless sky reminded me of my home on the coast. So at this point, you need to add these definitions to your notes, or at least copy the terms down and find and create your own definitions. Okay, we'll keep going. Punctuation, or the lack thereof, the lack of punctuation, can change meaning and add depth to your poetry. So you need to choose your endings well, or choose your punctuation well. Those aren't my words. That's a quote. Sorry, quotation. All right, so this is another quotation about punctuation. When thinking about punctuation in a poem, the poet has to ask themselves what purpose the punctuation is serving. Does the poet want a full stop, or do they want a short pause? A short pause or a full stop at a critical moment can cause the poem to turn in a different direction than it would have without it. So if you look at our choices of punctuation, periods, question marks, and exclamation marks are all placed under the category of full stops, whereas commas and semicolons and ellipses and dashes are placed under the category of short pauses. So let's have a look at a poem. The structure of your poem, where lines end and how lines are punctuated, help create meaning for readers of poetry. Consider these lines from the poem The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. Notice that the title of the poem is put in quotation marks, unlike titles of books that are underlined. So here's a line from the poem. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. This isn't how it was originally written. I've actually changed it. So there's a comma at the end of the first line and a period at the end of the second line. So when you think about it written this way, what are the important words in this section of the poem? Would you agree that wheelbarrow and chickens are the important words, being the end words and where the idea ends from one line to another? Probably. But if we look at the same lines, and we'll read them in the section as it was originally written, So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. See how the impact of the poem changes when it is structured this way. Do you agree that the images that are created are much more vivid in your mind with the second version? The ideas in each couplet or each pair of lines are emphasized. All right, so now it's your turn to figure out how to break up lines and punctuate this poem. Here are the instructions. Rewrite this poem to add meaning to the ideas and words. Do not change the order of the words in any way. Simply restructure the poem into lines and stanzas and add punctuation and capital letters when necessary. Here's the poem here. I'll actually retype it and put it on Edmodo in case you need it typed up there. And I'm not even going to read it out loud to you because I don't want to influence how you set up your lines and where you put punctuation. So if you need to freeze it here and rewrite it, decide how you will punctuate it and how you will change it into lines and stanzas.